All right. We'll allow some guests to continue to join, but in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all and good evening. Thank you for joining us for the second of our 4 panel events through our Mercersburg at Home the month of October. We certainly welcome you to campus for our in-person programming, which we've traditionally hosted during Family and Alumni Weekend. But we're, of course, grateful for the opportunity to connect with more of you through this virtual platform. So we're certainly grateful that you've joined us for this evening. I do want to remind everyone that registration remains open for our remaining panel events. We will soon post a link in the chat for our registration for Thursday evening, which will be our traditional Dean's panel. We're welcoming Deans of Enrollment from Bates College, Georgia Institute of Technology, and Washington University in St. Louis as well. We're certainly excited to benefit from the expertise of 3 individuals who have been in this field for quite some time and who are very widely respected. So I encourage you to register and to attend Thursday evening's event as well. A number of questions were submitted in advance of this panel, and we have those questions prepared and ready to go. However, I would like to encourage anyone who has questions through the course of this Q&A to pose those questions in the Q&A feature, which should appear at the bottom of your screen. We're most happy to answer any questions that you have as it regards our work, specifically with 9th and 10th graders. And while we will do our best to address questions that may be more specific to your child, we will definitely focus our energy on addressing questions that may be more widely applicable. So with that, I'd like to, if I haven't already, more formally introduce myself. My name is Mike Conklin. I am the Director of College Counseling here at Mercersburg. And then I would like to ask actually my colleagues to introduce themselves before we start answering your questions. So Rachel, if you would like to begin.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Mallory. I'm an Associate Director of College Counseling here at Mercersburg. Really excited to have you join us. Among my other hats on campus, I coach girls cross country in the fall and spring track. And I live in Fowl Hall with all of your 9th and 10th grade girls. That's an important fact.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Glenn Neufeld. This is my 7th year here at Mercersburg, and it's hard for me to believe that it's been 7 years. I am a college counselor here as well as the head swim coach. Those are my 2 primary responsibilities. I live in Tippets Hall, so if you have a 9th grade boy, he's a floor or 2 floors below me in Tippets, and I'm glad to be here this evening.
My name is Cindy Fowler, college counselor. I do not live in one of the dorms, however, live just off campus, but my husband works in Fowl Hall as well. So he knows most of the girls in Fowl Hall.
All right. So with that, I am going to begin with your questions. And just a reminder, you're welcome to continue entering questions through the course of this Q&A, and many of the questions are going to be posed as a follow-up to the pre-recorded webinar series that we released just more than a week ago, which covered a range of topics that are relevant to students in every grade level, a few of which are perhaps more relevant to students and parents of 9th and 10th graders. So we're happy again to take your questions, but I want to start by posing my first question to Rachel. And it's written with regard to the types of support that we offer our students. Rachel, you've taken some responsibility in the last year for our 9th and 10th grade curriculum. Can you briefly describe our 9th and 10th grade programming and perhaps the purpose of that programming?
Sure, happy to. So we begin meeting with students in the 9th and 10th grade year, and each year we'll meet with the class as a full group about 4 times throughout the year. We really do try to take a holistic approach in getting to know your students from day one and helping them to cultivate a core set of skills that will, when the time comes, help them with the decision making and choosing a college that's the best fit for them, and truly thinking about their interests, skills, talents and strengths as part of their college search and application process. It's all about fit when it gets to those later years. But the skills that we're helping to develop in the early years in 9th and 10th grade are really skills that your students can use throughout their lives, important decision-making skills, critical thinking, analytical skills, and a lot of self-awareness and relationship building, which you all, I'm sure, can identify with as parents. So in 9th grade, we're really starting to lay some of that groundwork. Our first session, actually, we're excited this year to partner with our English classes in a session that's going to be writing a letter to their senior selves. So when you think about it, your students have just come to Mercersburg for their 9th or 10th grade year. They're still early in the process. And so we want to start, we want to have our students look back on the experience of transitioning to boarding school. What's that been like for them? What were some of the challenges academically, personally, socially? Really, what was that like for them? And then thinking ahead to what do they hope to get out of their high school experience, so that ideally we'll be able to return this letter to them in their senior year and they can say, gee, what changed? What did I do well? And what didn't I do as I thought I would? And then we want to build on that and help them to build some goal setting skills and continue thinking a little bit further into the future. So we work with them on habit building rather than specific goal setting. So thinking about the small steps that help them to be successful and reach a larger goal. So we work with them on that. And then towards the end of the year, we start to introduce them a little bit to our Maya learning platform, which they'll use more as they go through the 4 years with us. And we'll engage them in some self-assessments. So beginning that self-awareness work as their cognitive development is continuing to change. As they enter into 10th grade, they're a little bit more able to wrap their head around self-awareness and understanding of others and emotions and things like that. So the theme in 10th grade sort of shifts more to self-understanding and self-awareness and relationships with others. So we also partner with our human development classes that take place during the X-Block period. It's a new rotation every Monday, and 10th graders engage in a program called Wayfinder, which is all about finding their purpose, defining their values, what they want in the future, what their strengths are. So we'll work with the Wayfinder program a couple of times throughout the year. And then towards the end of the year, we engage our students in the spring in individual conversations around course registration. So continuing that longer term thinking about what courses can they be taking now that allow them to explore the subjects that they might want to study in college, where are their strengths and things like that. So really helping them to explore. A lot of the 9th and 10th grade year is all about exploration and getting to know themselves. And so we really want to help them to build those relationships with others, build the relationships with us, so we have an easier time in those conversations and getting to know them.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Obviously, one of the, I wouldn't say unintended, it's actually very much intended, but one of the consequences of that programming is that we have an opportunity to engage with our students in a meaningful way earlier in their time here. But certainly as a boarding school, we have opportunities to build those relationships informally as well. Glenn, can you speak briefly to how those informal relationships, those informal interactions that we establish maybe outside of this office inform our counseling?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most of us have heard the phrase at one point or another in our lives in regarding raising children and working with kids is it takes a village. And in choosing to send your kids to a boarding school like Mercersburg, you're sending them to an incredible village. And we have great academics, we have great facilities for athletics, but the core of any boarding school experience is the relationships that the kids get and the number of voices that are in their conversation. And what do I mean when I say that is that, our kids will have their classroom teachers and they will have their advisor. They will have their dorm faculty, the faculty that live with them and do duty with them in the dormitory. They'll have their coaches in sports or their leaders if they're in the dance program or in Stony Batter or in community engagement or wherever they choose to engage in terms of the things that they do. And the wonderful thing, later in the process, one of our biggest roles is to be your son or daughter's biggest advocate when it comes down to college selection and recommendations. And for us, it's a combination of the observations that we make from 9th grade when we know that they're in our college counseling group. I don't want to sound like a stalker, but it's a small school and a small community, and you always get the chance to observe kids interacting with their peers and what they're doing and how they're doing it. So that's one nature of the relationships. And then we'll talk to people. We'll talk to their coaches. We'll talk to their teachers. We'll see their comments, and we'll be able to tell their story, because in essence, our relationship with them is to learn what makes them tick and to help guide them in building their story, and then eventually to tell that story, utilizing all the relationships that they built by tapping on all those branches of the tree. So that is, it's the nature and the quality of relationships with a variety of adults. And the one thing that I always say to kids when they're looking at Mercersburg is that the wonderful thing about all those relationships is every student is going to find their person, right? And that person might be their advisor. It might be the coach in their primary sport or activity. It might be a dorm faculty member that they sat and had great conversations with, until late in the evening sometimes. But they're going to have that person that later in life, they're going to come back here to see. And yeah, they're going to see their teachers and their coaches, and they're going to give hugs and say hi. But we get to see all that and interact and kind of be a center of the web of those relationships for them to guide that story and then tell that story.
Yeah, the number of times that I have made reference to a conversation that I've had with a student outside the office, be it in the dining hall or on the playing field, through their 9th and 10th grade year, as I'm writing a letter about their tremendous growth through the 3 or 4 year experience at Mercersburg. It's quite frankly too many to count. So I'm grateful that we have the resources and the benefit of being among our students at an earlier point in their time here to be able to tell that story, as Glenn suggested. Cindy, related to that and some of those informal interactions, we made a decision last year to assign students to a college counselor in the winter term of their first year at Mercersburg, regardless of their year of entry. Can you articulate or explain just a little bit about why that decision was made and what the potential benefits of assigning students that early are?
Sure thing. So without reiterating everything that my colleagues have said so far this evening, it is basically a lot of what we just talked about. A lot of what Rachel said in terms of the development. We get to watch what they're doing and kind of just be along for the ride with them, which is wonderful. And as Glenn said, you have your people all over. So if, when we know students are in our group, then if we're at a soccer game, we're seeing them play soccer. If we know that they're in a play, we're seeing them in the play. It's wonderful to see that. I love seeing that, or seeing names, whether it's stage crew or on stage, that we know, we're going to be working with the student more closely, through this application process. And it's fun to take in those things. I love that we do it in the winter term. We get the chance to, leverage any connections that are made earlier in the year. So, especially for Rachel and Glenn, perhaps, making some of those connections in the dorm sometimes do allow for some of that. But whether it's there or in the dining hall, on the field, we are making some of those connections and we can leverage those. But whatever it is, we are connecting with those students earlier. It also gives a central point person, which is great. So if a 10th grader or a 9th grader has a question about programming, or they have a question about their schedule, we can have that opportunity to look at the big picture. Advisors are wonderful in working with their schedules with them. But it's nice to have that extra set of eyes. And it also is nice to have that kind of full picture, thinking ahead to college, looking at 4 years and trying to make sure that that's all set. So, we do go through schedules at the end of the year. But like I said, even, I had a 10th grader calling me last year. I'm looking at these summer programs. How can, can we spend some time working through it? It gives them a point person to be able to contact instead of just connecting with a random person, or a random counselor. It gives them a good connection, and then it starts our rapport. And I have notes from that. And now when I'm working with them as a senior, I'll be able to go back and look at that.
Thanks, Cindy. We do have a couple questions coming in, one of which is related to the assignments of students to a college counselor and whether or not it's possible to change this assignment. Generally speaking, if a change is requested, we'd really seek to understand why. And from my perspective, it's a conversation that, of course, it comes from a constructive place, and one in which I'm always interested in helping students to find the best fit. and identify someone that they have a strong relationship with. There are points at which this has happened, but we have carefully balanced our caseloads, and we're really deliberate in assigning students and in choosing who we work with. So it's not often that will happen, but certainly it's a conversation that I'm very much willing to have with any parent who's eager to have that conversation. And another question, Glenn, I'll toss this question actually back to you, that much of what we've discussed in terms of developing relationships, particularly in the dormitory, are related to the boarding experience. Can you talk about the ways in which we're forming our relationships with day students and the extent to which they're able to benefit from this experience as well, at least in terms of their interactions with the College Counseling Office?
I think there's a lot of stuff that runs in parallel for the day students and the boarding students. I think about some of the kids that I have had of late that were day students in the process. And we have to be a little bit more intentional about making sure we go out and get information, and have some interactions with them. So we do, it's easier with the boarding students that, because we're in the dorms with them and we see them on campus. But I think also what you're going to find for a day student, as your son or daughter is here, they will tend to be here more and more and longer throughout the day and often into the night, because their practices are, until 6 o'clock. And it's like, well, I may as well stay and have dinner. And then I've got a newspaper to work on, or, I'm doing a group project with someone. So they'll be here as they kind of come through their experience more than you might think or realize in 9th or 10th grade. So be prepared to drive them home late. But, but it is for us, we do have to be a little bit more intentional about making sure that we know what's going on in the lives of a day student. The other part of that question had a little bit to do with COVID. And, the one thing that I would say in that is that we're learning on the fly with COVID, I think the same way that everyone is. And we're going to do the best that we can to make sure that we do build those relationships and get the chances to do those interactions. And that really is just, if I sat here and said I know exactly what we're going to do amidst COVID, then I would lose all credibility, because I think you'd know that I was lying. That we're learning on the fly. We're changing our approach where we need to. And then the one thing that I always say is encourage kids to reach out to their faculty, the day students, for anything that they need. We are here for all of our kids, day student or boarding student. And every equation is a little bit different, even for the boarders. So encouraging them to know that their advisors are there, or that once they're assigned a college counselor midway through 9th grade, that we're here for them to answer questions as well, and make sure that they're tapping on those resources. But I hope that fits the bill on the question. So.
Thanks, Glenn. I do have, I want to address, there are two questions regarding the PSAT, which I'm happy to respond to. And really these questions are directed at how the PSAT will inform the college counseling process for 10th grade students. And really there's only one way in which it's going to meaningfully inform their experience, and that is to serve as a baseline as we make test prep recommendations for our students entering the 11th grade. So the PSAT for our 10th graders does not serve as the national merit qualifying test as it does for our 11th graders. It really serves the purpose of being a baseline in addition to the mock ACT that would allow us to make comparisons between the two exams to make an informed recommendation. For students who had not registered for the PSAT on October 17th, we also have the option to facilitate a Zoom proctored PSAT, which is not officially recognized by the College Board, but is designed to replicate the timing and the pace of an SAT in much the same way that the PSAT does, which would be proctored by our test prep organization, Marks Education. So students, we did have many 10th grade students who had registered for the PSAT, but we'll have many who also choose to take a Zoom proctored SAT, practice SAT, as a means of facilitating those test prep recommendations. But beyond that, those test scores don't really inform our interactions and our engagement with the students. And certainly in the absence of an official standardized test score, PSAT scores rarely inform how we begin to shape the list in the 11th grade and support our students through the early portions of that process. Rachel, with that said, speaking of the early portions of the process, as you described our programming, you noted that for our 9th and 10th graders, we're really focused on cultivating a set of characteristics and skills that will guide them through the process when the time comes. We make a deliberate choice not to begin that process in the 9th and 10th grade. Why is that? Why do we wait until the 11th grade to really begin the college search process in earnest?
That's a great question, and one that I know I've had parents ask before. It has come up that, and to be perfectly frank, developmentally, your students aren't quite ready to think about that. When we talk about, I know I mentioned some of the cognitive changes that are happening with that decision making and where their brains are. They're just not quite there, and in many cases, they just got to Mercersburg. They're just learning what we're all about here, what our programming is like. And so we really want to encourage them to take those first 2 years that they're at Mercersburg and get to know themselves, really figure out what are they interested in, what are their strengths in the classroom. Do they like more traditional lecture-based classes, or do they like the seminar style with lots of questions and discussion that's happening all the time? We want them to get to know themselves over their first 2 years, so that when we start the conversations about what are you looking for college and beyond, like what do you want to get out of your college experience, they've got a concrete foundation to work from with their experience at Mercersburg. And those are more fruitful conversations for us. They can articulate the why behind why their interest in a particular subject. The number of times that I often have sat down years before with students in 11th grade who want to go pre-med, and I ask, okay, well, why? And they say, well, I want to help somebody, but I really don't like science and math. Let's tease that out a little bit, because that maybe the health professions are not the direction to go. So we can really get to engage in those conversations when they've had a chance to explore their interests at Mercersburg in a variety of different ways. And we're always going to ask them, why are you interested in this? What do you get out of this? And we want them to be exploring and having fulfilling experiences, not just sort of chasing that rat race towards achievement, but really understanding who they are and really understanding and defining their own identity while they're at Mercersburg, so they can really build off of that in college and make the best choice about the best fit for them.
So Glenn, that brings me to my next question. If our 9th and 10th graders aren't engaging in the college process, beyond our programming with them, what can 9th and 10th graders be doing in order to prepare for the process?
So my answer, the very simple answer, and I think I said this more than a couple times in the webinar that I had prepared on the student athlete possibilities, is work hard. Work hard to be successful in all of the things that they do. And for younger kids, for that 9th or 10th grader, sometimes it's learning what working hard actually means, right? But the biggest piece of advice and the biggest support that you can give as parents to them is encouraging them to work hard to be successful in all of their endeavors, whether that is in the classroom, whether that is on a playing field or on a stage, or if it's in building their relationships in the dorm. So we're encouraging them to work hard, and then we're encouraging them to learn what it takes for them to be successful. Every kid is a little bit different. Some kids study better sitting at their desk in the dorm. Some kids study better going to the library. So one of the benefits of the boarding school experience is the ability for them to figure out what that is. And whether they're a day student or whether they're a boarding student, learning is the best place for me sitting at the kitchen table or sitting at my desk, or is it, hey, I need to be in the library and be in that environment, along with the skills, not just the geography of where they can be successful, but what are the skills that they need to work on. And those are conversations that we can always have with them, and that we have, Margaret Matula, our learning specialist, who can work with any kid on how are you studying and what are you doing and learning to be successful. So it's about working hard on the one hand, and then figuring out what their unique equation is that means working hard, or that is equated to here are the things that each individual needs to do to be a success.
Now that equation and that hard work isn't necessarily limited to the experience of the school year. We know that some of our students will pursue opportunities through the summer as well. Cindy, can you talk a little bit about how we support students who may have an interest in pursuing summer programming and the ways in which we might guide students to do that?
Sure, great question. And to kind of expand on what Glenn said, just in terms of exploring those interests, we have amazing adults in this community, whether it's teachers, coaches, other faculty and staff. So at any point when students want to engage deeper in an interest, those resources are there in terms of, if it's your sport and you want to find out more, those coaches are willing to help you, guide you with that. But similarly with the College Counseling Office, if you have questions about either academic, working harder or working on something over the summer academically, or if it's getting engaged in something that maybe you don't have a specific contact person for, or you're just not sure where to go, you're not sure where you want, what you want to spend your time doing. We're absolutely available to have those conversations with students. I had a student reach out last year about, okay, I'm thinking a couple years ahead and I'm thinking about art school. What can I be doing? So I reach out to the art teacher, we collaborate, and we have some interesting conversation. So we are available. We have a lot of resources within our office. We all subscribe to many emails and listservs that have numerous resources that are available that we can provide. We collaborate within our office. If there's something, hey, we know this kid wants to do something in this field, or we know they want to look for a specific type of program in the summer, we help each other out with that as well. So we don't necessarily kind of push it out and say, here are things that you could or should be doing. But students that are looking for that and are willing to be proactive to reach out and say, hey, Mrs. Fowler, what kind of program could I be doing? Or, what kind of thing should I be pursuing? We're absolutely there for those conversations. And without getting too far ahead of myself in terms of details, if it's looking for something just to pad the resume, we're not necessarily looking for that. We want to strengthen those interests. We want to deepen those interests, and we want students engaged in things that they enjoy. And those are actually things that are much more beneficial on a college application as opposed to just a resume patter. So we want it to be meaningful, and we want to work with our student, and that's where having that relationship is helpful, because we know something, we can figure out something that is more productive and meaningful as opposed to just that line item. And with that in mind, there are a lot of college summer programs that are available to students, and I know some students have taken them out of an excitement and an interest in learning, and that is absolutely wonderful. But I just do want to mention that if your student is interested in that, that is great. But some of those programs that are offered, maybe at a Duke or a Stanford, those are not programs that are going to increase your likelihood of admission to any of those schools. And I know sometimes people think that if I take this USC program, will that increase my likelihood of acceptance? So I just kind of want to leave that out there, that is not necessarily the case, but it does show an interest in learning. So if you are interested in learning a language or taking a food class, even like if it's something that you're excited and if your student is excited and passionate about, we want to encourage that, and we will definitely, we're definitely available to have those conversations.
Thanks, Cindy. I've had a couple questions come in about parent engagement. We've talked a lot about our interactions and our relationship to students, and certainly we are eager to communicate with you. One of the first questions that I received was with regard to when parents can actually reach out to a student's college counselor, and the answer to that is quite honestly at any time. We are available to you. One purpose of assigning students in their year of entry is to provide you as parents a point of contact as well, so that if you have questions with regard to any aspect of your child's experience here, including their experience through the college search process, you know who to call and you have that resource. I am always eager to engage in meaningful conversation with parents and to address any of the questions and concerns that they may have. And actually, quite frankly, feel far better prepared to support students when parents proactively engage in the process and provide perspective. We know that as students move into the 11th grade and start articulating their preferences and priorities, that parents also have a set of preferences and priorities, and maybe actually much more familiar with the needs of the family than the students may be, or maybe perhaps more attentive to those needs. So truly, we do provide opportunities through a questionnaire at the beginning of this process, and we will provide regular updates to families, certainly through the 9th and 10th grade. As a follow-up to most of our formal programming, we will provide updates. And then in the 11th grade and 12th grades, we will provide updates by term for the 11th graders. And certainly when we begin meeting with students more frequently, we'll include meeting summaries from each counselor to students and their parents after each meeting. And then in the senior year, those updates come much more frequently as the process unfolds in a bit more an intense pace than may have been the case earlier in their experience here.
Mike, can I just add something to that?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah, please.
One of the things that I think I've really appreciated in the 6 years that I've been at Mercersburg as well, and engaging with parents, is getting to meet with you all and engage with you all early on. So when it comes to the challenging, stressful, sometimes anxiety-ridden process of college, we already have a good relationship. We know how, you know how I work, I know how you work. You can, and it really helps in building that relationship so that it's much easier to work together as we go through the process. And I think one thing that wasn't mentioned earlier when we talk about assigning students, we try to keep siblings with the same counselor as well, because that gives us familiarity with your family. And we do understand that each student is different. I love having siblings because they are so different, and it's fun to see how those differences play out. And it's also really great to get your take on your students and their siblings as well, to see what that dynamic is like from your perspective. So that relationship is so important for us to really be able to work successfully with you and make sure that we're supporting your students fully.
One question that is sort of a two-part question is, can students apply to as many colleges as they want, assuming that they can handle the amount of work that would require and within a reasonable limit? Rachel, I'm actually going to go right back to you in terms of thinking about the number of applications that our students are typically submitting and how it is that we advise students with regard to the length of their list, and obviously the length being working in tandem with and in context of the selectivity and the appropriate range of colleges that they would be applying to.
Sure. So when we start working with students on the list, we do try to start kind of small because we want the students to, again, look at a variety of schools and tailored to their interests. We're going to make some suggestions, but then we also want them to kind of springboard off of that to begin to identify schools for themselves. And when we think about creating that list, we want to keep it manageable. And generally when it comes to the application process, I think we try to follow a guideline of recommending between 8 to 10 schools to make sure that that workload continues to feel manageable, but also so that your students can really get to know their schools. When we talk about the idea of finding the right fit, we want them to be able to articulate that to each school as well. And it takes time to research a school fully and really be able to go down the rabbit hole of understanding their interests, what the social experience is like, what the academic experience is like. Maybe your student wants to do research, so we want them to engage in, maybe have an email conversation with a professor at that school or engage with the students in a variety of ways. That can take a lot of time. That's not something that's just a quick hour of research on the website, and really getting to know the schools. And when it comes to their applications, trying to manage a list of 15 to 20 schools where you're really doing that kind of in-depth research is really challenging and very time consuming. And if you know your students, a lot of them like to procrastinate as well. So finding time where they're going to prioritize that list is something that can sometimes be challenging. Students will leave over the summer with great intentions to research this really big list, and then we come back in the fall and they've really taken a deep dive into a handful of them. So managing that list, certainly we don't put a cap on the number of schools that a student can apply to, but we are going to have some intentional conversations with your students about why a school is on their list. And we really want them to have solid reasons behind the selectivity, the ranking, some of the surface level facts about a school. We want them to really be able to understand the school and articulate why that's a good fit for them and their interests. And it's also, when it comes to writing supplemental essays, and being able to articulate that is really key. Colleges are looking more and more at those supplemental essays of why are you interested in X, Y, or Z college? And they're looking for students to be specific. And that can, again, be challenging if you have an extensive list. And we've seen students add schools last minute, and it doesn't go well at that point because they haven't had the chance to research the schools and really get to know them. So it's really making sure that your students are intentional about the schools they're looking at, the reasons they're looking at an institution, and again, coming back to getting to know themselves in that process.
Thanks, Rachel. I will add, even the most organized and the hardest working of my students have a tipping point when they have cast too wide a net, and unfortunately, the quality of their work and the quality of their engagement tends to suffer as a result. So, if it's helpful context, I do want to note that our senior class in each of the last 3 years has submitted on average 7.9 applications. That does include a number of students who have applied to only one college through early decision and been admitted. But generally speaking, our students are looking at between 8 to 10 colleges and universities and actually following through with an application. So Glenn, while we are far from building a list with our 9th and 10th graders, we do know that some students are eager to get started on this process. For those students, particularly for our 10th graders who may be eager to begin visiting colleges, to begin doing their research, what would you recommend for those students? How can they begin that process in a thoughtful way?
So the biggest piece of advice that I give to parents of younger children is help them learn what they actually like, not what they think they like. And that means, you don't want to say in 9th grade, hey, we're going to go see Harvard. Because to go back to something that Rachel referred to earlier, what happens there developmentally is sometimes they get fixated on that place. Like, oh my God, this is it. And they lose track of everything else, and they're not ready for that. But the biggest thing that you can do to them or for them is that when you are on vacation in a place, hey, we're in Charleston, South Carolina. Let's go see a mid-sized university of 10,000 students in a good southern city, in DOC, the College of Charleston. Or we're driving across the state of Pennsylvania, and Penn State does happen to be right in the middle. So let's go see a big state school in a great college town. And that could describe 30 different schools in the Big Ten or SEC athletic conferences or in other locations around the country. Or we're in New York City, so let's go see NYU or Fordham. You don't have to be, oh, let's go see Columbia or the most selective, but let's go see a school with a campus in the middle of a city. And then maybe we're seeing museums in Washington, DC. So let's go see a school without a campus, George Washington, in the middle of a big city. We're driving and we're on vacation in Maine. So let's go see the University of Maine and Bowdoin College, a small liberal arts college and a mid-sized state university. It's about helping them figure out what they actually are attracted to. So that way, when they sit down with us, it's not, well, I don't want to go to a small school. And then I ask, well, how many small schools have you been to? Well, I haven't. I just know I don't want to go to them. So it's, but if then they say, but like we were on vacation and I saw Bates and Bowdoin, and then I saw Franklin and Marshall because we were in Amish country or wherever it was. And I don't know that I really like small schools. I'm going to give that statement a whole lot more credence than, well, I haven't seen them, I just know. So it's about exposing your kids to different types of schools and different types of settings so that they know or they discover what is a small liberal arts college and what is a major research university and all of the points in between. So it boils down to the phrase that I used, which is help them learn what they like, not what they think they like.
I will often use the phrase, challenge their assumptions, which is something that I like to do with each of my students. It will come as no surprise to my colleagues. I have a number of students every year at the beginning of this process that will tell me, Mr. Conklin, I've done the cornfields of South Central Pennsylvania for 3 or 4 years. Give me New York, Boston, DC, Atlanta. And then they visit and they see those large urban campuses, and they'll come back to my office after having had that experience and have a change of heart and a completely different perspective. And so I find a great deal of value in challenging their assumptions and introducing them to a range of options early in the process that will affirm their interests and affirm the choices that they make through the balance of this process. One of the questions that's come in through the chat that I want to address is with regard to when we assign college counselors to our students and when we begin meeting with our students one-on-one. So we do assign students generally in the winter term of their year of entry. So we will communicate that information to the student and to you as parents in the winter term. And we begin working with our students one-on-one generally in the winter term of their 11th grade year. Most of our programming is programming that we will host in small groups, generally with our caseloads once those assignments are made. So I will be working with anywhere from 20 to 25 students at any given time. But really when the college search process begins, we begin meeting with our 11th graders regularly one-on-one. Our time is really devoted in the fall term to our senior class. They have a range of needs as they prepare and submit their applications. And so we're very eager to support them and are more fully devoted to doing that. It is worth saying that we do meet with our 10th graders generally one-on-one to discuss their course registration at the end of the 10th grade year. Their course selection going into 11th grade, more so than in previous years, will impact their 2-year trajectory, and a lot of those courses will serve as prerequisites for the courses that they may prefer to take in their senior year. So we're helping students to understand how colleges might interpret their transcript, how colleges might interpret their course selection, and we're providing that context for them. So we do have a one-on-one meeting with our 10th graders, and that typically occurs in the month of April as our students are navigating the process of registering for courses. Cindy, I want to go back to a question about parent communication. We did have a question that was submitted prior to the panel about checklists and whether or not we provide checklists to parents. I know that you've been working on updating some of our checklists in My Learning and otherwise. So if you could provide some insight there, that would be great.
Yeah, when you log into My Learning, just to I'm kind of getting ahead a little bit here, but in My Learning, there's a dashboard when you first log in that has just a sort of a to-do, and it's an activities and task list that our students are able to utilize, and they can mark activities as complete when they're done, and is it a great central resource in order to be able to track those activities. We're currently using those lists with our 11th and 12th graders. So as a 9th or 10th grade parent, if you have logged in and seen that, I will tell you that as of now, that is not updated. So I'll kind of give that disclaimer. And Rachel and I have been working a little bit with some of the tools within Maya. So that's actually something pretty easily that we can update quickly. But know that we will be updating that very soon. So that is a meaningful list. You know, as we've talked a little bit tonight about what should be what needs to be done or what should be happening with students, you know, understand and remember that there are no major tasks. We're not looking for particular things right now, and we're not utilizing, so, you know, some of those resources just yet within Maya. But that list will be updated. Like I said, when it becomes to 11th grade, it will be by term. There'll be a checklist that's available for students. We just uploaded it for the 11th graders. And then when we have the second part of our kickoff in November, they'll be able to go in, they'll be able to see that and utilize that, and it keeps them on track. And then same thing for seniors, they get a monthly checklist, and it's just a reminder of all the things they need to be doing, whether it's letters of recommendation, transcript request forms. Those things are just an easy way to keep track of them. We also have those lists available as PDF documents. So those will be sent out to parents as well with the office communications. And again, whether it's that term checklist for 11th graders or the monthly checklist for seniors, we will be communicating those as well. And that way parents can see what some of their tasks are, especially, you know, in those summer months as the students are home. You can have those conversations of, oh, these are some of the things you should be working on. And, you know, you can have those conversations at home and know what your students are up to. You know, in addition to the emails that are coming from us with status updates too. But it kind of gives you that little glimpse in there to what is happening.
Thanks. So I just want to acknowledge that as the questions come in, and we're receiving quite a few now, they're covering a range of topics. So we may be kind of jumping from one topic to the next, but there are a lot of great questions that I'm very happy to answer and to have my colleagues answer as well. Glenn, I'm going to direct this one to you. We've talked a lot about how we really don't begin the process in earnest until the 11th grade. However, we know that some of our student athletes are maybe feeling pressure to begin the process sooner, to commit. And for some students, that will involve choosing where to attend prospect days, which we know can be costly. Can you talk about how we advise our 9th and 10th grade prospective student athletes through this process, and maybe how families can be a bit more deliberate so that they're preventing unnecessary expenses in the process of being a recruited athlete?
And I think that I'll preface this one with the answer of every sports recruiting calendar is a little bit different. So the first step is really, going to the NCAA website and making sure that you're looking at the recruiting calendar for the sport that your son or daughter is in. Generally, when coaches are allowed to contact kids, it's June 15th after 10th grade or September 1 of the 11th grade year. And that's for most sports. Football, basketball, revenue sports are a little bit different. But I think in essence, it starts with knowing what the calendar is for your specific sport. The next thing is making sure that people here know that that is the aspiration for your son or daughter, and looping in their coach of their sport, their primary sport at Mercersburg, and then where possible and where appropriate, having a dialogue that might include the school coach, the club coach, and you guys as the parent, so you can figure out what is the right prospect camp to go to, or the ID camp in soccer, or the lacrosse camp. Because you could spend an immense amount of time and financial resource going to camps where they're not the appropriate ones for your kids. So making sure that you're communicating with coaches early, and then communicating that also to college counselors. So then we can start to say what is appropriate athletically. Is this camp that has 17 Division I schools at it the appropriate one for your kid if they're really identifying as they want to be a Division III athlete, or that's the more appropriate level. So that you can start to filter on that. And the reality is, in a lot of sports, it is a three-way street, or really a four-way street. The parent and the student athlete, the family for one, the school coach, the club coach, and the college coaches. But it's working in tandem and communicating to figure out what is the level that's appropriate. So that way we can also say early on, and things can change because development happens as an athlete and development happens as a student, right? But early on, here are schools that are athletically and academically appropriate and working together so that we can help you paint that picture. And then if things change, if your son or daughter is a late blooming athlete, and all of a sudden there's a difference from where they were in 10th grade to where they are at the end of 11th grade, because there can be huge physical development in there, or that the grades are on the upswing, so that you can keep that list current, so you can be getting to the events or the camps, or reaching out to the schools that are appropriate for your son or daughter. And that's the other thing that I would say is, don't rely on coaches to find your kid. It's for a very select few athletes in a very select few sports. The school might find them, but really for the most part, it starts with your son or daughter initiating that process by contacting a coach, or a coach here, or a club coach reaching out. And just working your way through that. But the biggest thing is how all that communication happens within that, so that we know what the goal is for your son or daughter, and it's got to be their goal, because they're going to spend too much time in a sport in college. If it's not something that they love, and then that we can help them get to that goal as the adults in their life.
Thanks, Glenn. We have two very similar questions that are in reference to students who have repeated a grade upon enrolling at Mercersburg Academy. Rachel, if you wouldn't mind speaking briefly to how that experience and how the transcript in particular of a student who has repeated a grade upon entry at Mercersburg will be interpreted or reviewed by the colleges that student applies to.
Sure. So as you might imagine, with students coming in the 10th grade, we have a number of students who are repeating either the 9th or 10th grade year when they come to Mercersburg, and all for a variety of reasons. Some students very strong academically, but maybe they're young for their age, or there's a variety of reasons. Any number of reasons go into that, as I'm saying. So when students repeat, we do mention and touch on that in our counselor letters to give context as to why, if necessary. And on the transcript, your student's transcript will show their years at Mercersburg, and we also include their previous high school transcript so that they can see, especially if you're talking about a student who is academically very strong, it's very clear that repeating the grade was for a different reason. And our counselor letters really are designed and written very specifically to your students to help give context about their experience at Mercersburg and who they've been throughout their high school years, why they came here, and how they've flourished and grown in our community. So it's a very common thing, and particularly in the independent school world, that you do see students who typically will repeat a grade when they come in, variety of reasons, whether they're looking for additional rigor, they're young for their age, any number of reasons. So colleges are really very understanding of that, and they understand how to review the different transcripts. At Mercersburg, we specifically do not calculate GPA, so that the colleges can recalculate based on their own scale and use all the information in front of them if they choose to use both 9th grade years or both 10th grade years, depending on what year the student repeated. It's all within their process, and they can understand the full context.
Yeah, and I will add that historically, between 18 and 20% of our student population has repeated a grade. And for the number of students that I have supported that have done so, it is universally positively received by the colleges and universities that they apply to. I can't think of a single instance in which a student did not benefit from that experience because they've had an opportunity to take more rigorous courses, to grow and mature through an additional year of experience in a boarding environment. And I think colleges recognize that readily when interpreting the transcript and letters of recommendation. So it is certainly positively regarded. In terms of our support of students who may choose to apply to a college or university outside of the US, I'm actually going to toss this one to the group because I know we've all had experience supporting students who are looking to attend a university abroad. And actually, maybe rather than toss this to the group, I'll invite you to add. I'm going to offer a little perspective to start. We do have a number of students who will apply to colleges and universities outside of the US. It is certainly a very different process in many ways. Within the United States, a lot of colleges and universities subscribe to what we refer to as a holistic admission review. And so they are taking into consideration a wide variety of factors, which would include a student's letters of recommendation, their level of engagement, the quality of their engagement in the communities to which they belong, all as supplemental to or in support of the transcript, and in some cases test scores as well. So they're accounting for all of these factors to determine the extent to which that student is an appropriate fit for the college or university and the extent to which that student might serve their institutional needs. When students are applying abroad, perhaps to the UK or even Canada, which are the most popular options that our students will consider, it is generally the metrics are much more rigid and also actually much more easily interpreted. And so it's worth noting that the process differs fairly significantly in that regard. We also advise our students to really think about the implications of studying abroad insofar as the university system may be set up quite differently from the system within the US. So in the UK, for instance, we know that students are really limiting the scope of their study across a 3-year experience. So that student who is maybe undecided or who is interested in seeking a range of courses as an undergraduate, the UK may not be an appropriate choice for that student. But we are well versed in supporting students through the process of navigating the UCAS system and applying to universities in the UK, as well as Canada and elsewhere in the world as well. So I'm happy to have any of my colleagues add to that conversation because I know we've all supported students who are, if not returning to their home countries, are looking for a new and different experience by studying abroad.
Yeah, like I'll start. I mean, I guess I still think of it as the essence of it is working with our kids so that they're doing the research, and that they know what they're getting into, and that if they are planning on going to the UK or back to Germany, because we've had German students over the years, that that they're really trying to identify what is the field that you want to be in and knowing that that's appropriate, but then doing the research in terms of what are they getting into with a given school or university setting. And how do they feel about that? But the idea of doing your homework and doing your research still stays the same. It's just a different set of schools, and there might be some different factors that need to get researched in there. In my 7 years, I've had kids go back to Germany. I've had kids go to Canada and the UK. So we do have that. And then the other wonderful thing that we have with 6 of us in the office is that we have a wonderful wealth of expertise across the board. And if, I did a meeting this summer with Austin Kerwin and one of my students who is now an 11th grader and was really thinking about, I want to go to the UK. I know some, but I know Austin knows more, having worked in the UK for a number of years. So we did a meeting together with my student. I've also met with other counselors in our office for a student athlete. Because as a former college coach, in the SEC, I'm tasked with having that familiarity with the rule set and the timelines, and not for every sport, but I know where to look for the information. So it's tapping those resources in our office to make sure that students' needs are met. We've all got some broad-based knowledge in the different areas, but we're also not afraid to say, hey, I need our office expert on UCAS or on financial aid or on some other aspect of the process.
I think jumping off of what Glenn said too, and what Cindy touched on earlier in terms of the resources and support systems that we have as counselors. There's a wonderful listserv specifically for counselors of independent schools. And I know in the last few days, even I've seen a lot of questions coming up about, do you know about this university in the Netherlands or this university in Spain, and what that application process is like. So there's a lot of crowdsourcing we can do as well. I'm thinking about a student this year who only actually has one US university that she's applying to, and her other 6 or 7 are all international, different countries. So we're navigating a lot of different systems, and in our meetings, virtually nonetheless. So it's been a really interesting process, but I'm sitting there and I'm researching the website with her because she's looking at it from the student perspective. I can look at it from the counselor perspective and help interpret some of the questions that are going to come up and understand, okay, they're saying this is what this really means in the process, or helping her to interpret the timelines, the process, what they're requiring. And it's been really fun. I feel like it actually has helped open up some great conversations with the students I'm working with. But it is really getting to know that system. And if we aren't sure of the answer, we've got some great resources we can reach out to in our professional networks.
There was a follow-up. I was just going to say, Cindy, there was a follow-up to that question with regard to AP courses. And I do want to note to our families that, well, not universally true, many universities abroad are actually interested in exam scores, and we are still going to administer AP exams and have identified for our students those advanced studies courses that are still aligned with the AP exam so that those students are able to prepare for, and we are able to project scores on those AP exams. So we're supporting students to do that in an effort to help them qualify or meet those admission requirements at those schools that do require AP exams. So we will certainly identify those students and support them to register for and take those exams when the time comes. Sorry, Cindy, to cut you off. Go ahead.
That's okay. And actually, I was going to kind of touch on, I hadn't even seen the question, but touching on that, just sharing any of those thoughts, as early as they arise. So as if you are thinking, or if your student is thinking about schools in the UK or Canada, just communicating that early, because similar to Glenn, I had a conversation with a student and one of our other counselors about the UCAS system. And then it came up that, well, an AP score is going to be important. And for a random reason, he ended up not having an AP score in one of his courses by choice. And if that's something that he had realized beforehand, and that might have made a difference. And it turned out to be a very short conversation. You know, he learned a little bit more about the UK system and then realized it wasn't for him, and that was okay. So communicating any thoughts like that early allows us to have those conversations to see if it's something that we're going to pursue, whether it's Canada, UK, anywhere else abroad. We can continue, you know, work through that and see if it's a viable option. And same thing within the country. But, you know, the earlier we know some of your thoughts or preferences, we can work through that as they evolve.
So there are two questions that speak to our earlier conversation about summer programs and the support that we provide there. I do want to acknowledge that, you know, in addition to Cindy's information and points about the services that we provide for our 9th and 10th grade students, we very deliberately with all of our 11th grade students speak to the summer experience early in their 11th grade year. We'll begin asking those students in the winter term what their plans are for the summer as a means of helping them to prepare in order to have a meaningful experience through the summer. I do want to note, however, that while internship opportunities, while educational programs sponsored by a college or university can be wonderful experiences that will certainly support the student's admission, colleges are unequivocal in stating that they value the full scope of what students choose to do with their time. So for students who have family obligations at home, who may choose employment opportunities, and perhaps in part because of those family obligations, really what's most important is that those students are actively engaged and taking on additional responsibility through the summer in ways that would be personally fulfilling and perhaps intellectually fulfilling as well. So we, in the winter term of the 11th grade year, we'll have those conversations, and certainly for those 9th and 10th graders who are interested in seeking and applying for such programs, we do let our students know in our class meetings or caseload meetings through the winter term that we're available to have those conversations as well. So we're most certainly available to them and to parents who have those questions and supporting them to that end. So with that, I think that concludes all of our questions for this evening. I would like to thank you all very much for taking the time to join us for this evening. You've had quite a few outstanding questions, you know, and I've been very happy to be able to provide some additional information and context, though it's entirely possible that we've not covered the full range of your questions. So please do not hesitate to follow up by email with me or with any of our counselors should you have additional questions and concerns, specifically those questions that might be more closely related to your needs as a family and to the search of your child. I do want to remind everyone as well that we have Thursday evening's panel event with our college admission deans, and we would love for you to participate. I think Cindy early in the presentation had posted the link to the registration page in the chat. And also I want to remind you that we have a series of pre-recorded webinars that we've posted to our website, which we would be happy to have you view. And should you have any follow-up questions in response to those webinars, we'd be happy to address those questions as well. So with that, I would like to conclude the evening. Thank you all so much for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful night.